sports illustrators in the world, with clients including Rolling Stone, Nike, the New Yorker, the New York Times Magazine, Vice, Tennis Magazine, and ESPN. And so let's welcome Mickey. Hi Mickey, how are you doing?
Hi, Poo. Thank you so much. Thank you, Amy,
Yes, we are very honored to have you this evening and morning there.
That's right. Yeah. No, this is a real thrill for me. Obviously, the Asian embassies. I think this cultural exchange program is so important. I'm an American artist, but what we're talking about are ideas that cross borders and are important to discuss because art is reflective of our values, and so that's what we're really talking about. Aside from filmmaking and animation and all of this, it's what we value and what we spend our time making and sharing with one another.
Sure. And so, Mickey, I will not interrupt more the presentation, so I will give the time to you to have your presentation.
Okay, great. Well, I want to just start by saying that what we're going to discuss today. So, as you heard in the introduction, my way of filmmaking is taking a hybrid approach between doing shot footage and interviews, but also including this like really strong visual language in the form of animation, but also hand-drawn lettering and different visual elements, and all of that comes from my start being a visual artist, being an illustrator. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a story of how I got started into directing film, and how I kind of have my system of creating documentaries with animation. I'm going to share my presentation here. Okay, so this is called Making Losers. Just to kind of start, I want to share that these are some of the. I started my career as an illustrator, not even as an animator. I did drawings for magazines and newspapers and book jackets and apparel, and I had a real focus on sports. I did that for about 10 years. I went to school to study illustration, and I did that for a while, had a really good and fun, satisfying career doing that. But after a while, I really wanted to get more into storytelling. That was something that I didn't feel was something that I could explore that much in the work that I was doing. So I was looking for ways to do more of that. I had a couple friends who were experimenting with some basic animation, doing it through Photoshop, which was a program that I use every day in my work. Guys like Dash Shaw and James Blagden are illustrators, and they were just doing these really simple animations with their work, and I thought that might be a fun thing for me to explore as well. So I started to do these little basic animations, not that many frames, not 30 frames a second like you would see for a major animation studio, but only maybe 2 or 3 frames a second, very graphic and choppy. But I thought it was fun to see the work come to life in a different way. There seemed to be some new things to explore. So I was doing this and sending those little animations around to the different clients that I would work with. And I got an opportunity to work on my first documentary, which was directed by a guy named Mike Bonfiglio in New York. And he really liked my work. He liked these very simple animations that I was playing with. And his film was about an athlete named Bo Jackson, who famously in the U.S. played American football and baseball, professional baseball at the same time. And Bo growing up had all of these, there were all these stories about him where he would do these amazing physical feats that were not caught on camera, but there were these stories, these larger than life stories about him. So because there were no photos, because there was no video footage of this, the director came to me and said, well, you can use your skills as an animator to bring some of those stories to life. So, rather than doing a recreation with an actor or something. So they brought me in to their production company and they showed me a rough cut of their film. And the sequences that they wanted me to animate were right at the beginning of the film. But it was funny that day. I had actually stayed up all night working on a deadline for another project, so I was in kind of a weird headspace. And when I watched the film, I got all of these ideas of how we could maybe use animation and graphics in other ways, rather than just keeping the animation at the very beginning of the film, how to kind of do a visual treatment for the entire film, doing hand-drawn lettering, lettering lower thirds, introducing different characters in the film through these kind of illustrated, almost baseball card type images, and they went for it. So the director was excited about it. He let me do it. So I got started working on the project, and animation was still really new to me, so I was still drawing everything on paper, which is how I did everything during my illustration career. And it was just a real opportunity for me to explore all of these different kind of ways of bringing a story to life through animation. And I did so many drawings over a period of I think 4 months. I worked on that project, and this is an example of one of the finished drawings in ink that I would scan in color in the computer. So here's one of the finished frames. This is one of the physical feats that Bo was said to have done. Jumped 40 feet over a ditch. And here's another story of him angry as a young man, getting into a fight with some neighborhood kids. But here's an example of something else that we did, where we introduced a different character through this very stylized treatment. Instead of just including information in a lower third about someone, to say who they are and where they came from, kind of did it in this fun way, where we brought different information onto the screen. And also here's an example of a hand-drawn title that I did for the film. I think I ended up doing about 30 or 40 titles for the film, different dates, different things like this. So that was really, really exciting for me. And the film came out on ESPN, which is the largest sports TV network in the United States. And the film did really, really well. So I think it was their highest rated documentary for a number of years. So all of a sudden people started to associate me with being an animator rather than just an illustrator. And that created an opportunity for me a couple months later when I pitched a story to ESPN's website, actually, that I wanted to do kind of a written and illustrated thing for them. And they said, well, we really love your animation. Instead of doing just a blog post, would you be willing to turn that story into an animated short? So I had never aspired to being a documentary director. Like I said, I went to art school to be an illustrator. I didn't go to film school. I'd never really even been trained as an animator. So this was something that was going to be a whole new direction for me, something that I wanted to take a chance on. And I said yes, because I had had such a great experience on the Bo Jackson film, where the director really brought me into the process and, introduced me to their editor and to their sound designer. So that was a really exciting process for me.
Sorry for jumping a little bit, Mickey. I just want to express my comment that lack of sources sometimes bring us to more creativity.
Definitely.
Yeah.
No, I found that to be a really exciting opportunity, and
Yes.
a little intimidating too. But it wasn't, them asking me to make a feature film. I think the first film that I ended up making was only about 7 minutes
Mhm.
long. Uh, one last thing about the Bo Jackson film that really got me excited about documentary filmmaking. After the film came out, it was made for TV, so the big premiere was on TV. But to show the film to some people in the sports world, the director of the film rented a theater in New York and premiered the film in front of an audience and brought everyone who worked on the project, including myself, and including myself and the whole team sitting in the back. And they screened the film. This was the first time I'd ever seen any of my work, on a big screen with a live audience. So it was very different and exciting. And there was one part of the film where they discuss an injury that Bo Jackson had that actually ended his career. And they had someone, a doctor on screen, talk about how he dislocated his hip. And when he did that, it actually severed a major artery in his hip. This was something that was always confusing for sports fans, and this was something that we were able to bring to life through this anatomical drawing that I did. And in the part where they describe exactly what happened, I'll just show you, I did this little animation here where you can see the leg pop out of the joint. And in the theater, when they played that part, and the hip socket popped open like that, everyone in the theater went like like that, and were either horrified or disgusted. And that reaction really stuck with me in my mind because it was such a simple just sequence of drawings, but it made such an emotional impact within the structure of this documentary film that had, sound design and music to it, and obviously the story that the director put together. So that moment really stayed with me because it felt very different than the way that my work, kind of impacted people prior to that. And when I got the opportunity to direct my own short film, I thought, well, there's more emotional potential to explore in animation within storytelling. So I want to describe a little bit of how I figured out, how to incorporate animation into a documentary film. We're not going to talk that much about, the production side of filmmaking, which is, how to use a camera to set up an interview and light it and shoot B-roll and all of that. I'm really going to focus just on the animation, which happens mostly in post-production, because I feel like the way that I do it is not like how an animation studio really does it. I feel like I do take an artist's approach, kind of an indie, almost one-man approach, because like I said with the Bo Jackson film, and also how I did my first few short films, I did all the art myself. So this is how to do it on a smaller scale. And if there are any directors out there or students who might want to experiment with this, here's my little system of how to try doing that. So step one is taking field notes when you're out shooting your film or doing interviews. You'll want to start thinking about animation early. I'm always thinking visually. That's, I think, a more natural language for me to think of things in, given that I'm a visual artist. But I think, you know, if you're thinking about how to use animation in your film, start thinking about it early. With regards to the Blackjack episode that we're talking about today, some ideas that I had coming out of his interview, how Jack knocked his teeth out as a kid, a montage of Jack getting kicked out of the many schools that he was kicked out of, and when he played at the West Fourth basketball courts for the first time. Those are kind of, very famous basketball courts in New York City, and that's where he got, some of his street credibility. So those were sequences that I thought, I would really want to explore in the episode with him. So step 2 is, once you get into the edit, you start by doing a radio cut or an audio cut, where not everything is, you don't have the entire film edited, but, you have the main subjects telling the story. And for the parts where it seems like, you want to explore including animation, what I do is I just put, black slugs into the timeline, and, I'm sitting there with my editor, and we'll talk about different ideas of, what the animation is showing, and he'll just type in into Premiere some ideas that we'll have. So for this sequence that I'll kind of give you beginning to end how we did it, is when he was at West Fourth, showing the guys there his amazing skill. So we just typed in Jack rolls basketball across his shoulders, like doing this kind of fancy trick, throws it off the backboard and slam dunks the ball. So just for this radio cut, we'll do that, from the beginning to the end of the episode, just sort of typing things in. It's before any drawing gets done, and usually, even when you're playing the film and washing it down, you can start to imagine how those sequences will play. So after that, if everything feels like, it's cohesive, it's working well enough, this is when the drawing begins. I don't usually show people this stuff because it's still rough and really early, but I still like to draw on paper. I know a lot of people like to draw, straight into the computer or on iPad nowadays, but I still like to lay things out on paper. And you can see in the middle of this frame, there's the shot of him, or there's a little drawing of him rolling a ball on his arms, and then a little backboard, and on the bottom right, it shows him dunking the ball. So that's just for me to get my head around some of these visual sequences, how they'll look. I try to not plan them with hugely elaborate amounts of motion, because I know that even on Losers, when I did have a small team of animators helping me, less is more, because I didn't want to have it get out of hand with how much work I was asking everybody to do. So I'm always looking for limited solutions because I work with a small team. So I plan it out like this. After I get some thumbnails that feel like they're working, I move on to what I call a rough stage. It's doing rough storyboards, and color was so important in Losers. Every single episode had its own distinctive color palette. So when I was doing the rough storyboards, I would start to bring the palette into the drawings. And as you can see, these drawings are pretty close to the thumbnails that I drew. And once I do these rough storyboards for each of the animated sequences, step 5 is placing those roughs into the cut. So where previously they were those slugs that just had the written descriptions, now I'll put those rough storyboards into the cut. And I have to say, with these rough storyboards in there, you really get a sense of how the film is going to play. And I really, get to almost a locked cut with these rough storyboards. I add some sound design to it. I fully pace it out. I don't leave it, with extra space around anything. I really try and cut it pretty tight, to the point where, you can watch the episode down and, totally understand what's going on. Moments that are supposed to be funny should be at least, somewhat funny. Moments that are dramatic should have drama in them. There's not a real huge emotional difference between these rough boards and the finished animation. So once you get it working to this degree, step 6 is finishing the art and replacing the rough boards in the cut. And I mean, you can notice just through this process that, things from the very early thumbnails to the finished animation, there's not a wild difference. It's just about kind of refining it more and more. In the final art, of course, you get a little bit more expressive, and you smooth things out to a degree. But each step is important and doesn't take a huge team to do. I would say even for directors who aren't visual artists, that if this is something that you want to try, I would recommend that you at least try to do the thumbnail sketch part of this process. It really goes a long way, and putting those into the cut, you could still see how things work or not. So just with regards to how animation played a storytelling role in our series, I would say that it probably took up a third of the runtime in Losers, in each one of the episodes. And like I said, when I first worked on the Bo Jackson film, I've always been really interested in the emotional potential in animation, using those sequences within a documentary. And the series, because so many of these sports stories had different highs and lows to them. Some of the stories were funny. Some of the stories, like Surya Bonali's, was very very sad and tragic. There was an episode that had a crime component to it, where we recreated a crime in animation, and one of the episodes, the boxing episode, actually had some fairly graphic and scary sequences in them as well. And I felt that not only did animation give me as a director a real efficient tool to be able to explore all of those emotions, but actually when the series came out, I found that our audience really understood and appreciated the animation for the storytelling role that it played in each of the episodes. So, my self-consciousness sometimes is that, well, because not every documentary has animation, maybe there's going to be a certain portion of the audience that's going to, every time animation comes on, they're going to think, oh, this is horrible. Why didn't they just, get some footage to put in there, or do recreations in a different way? But I felt, to my surprise and my, satisfaction, that actually our audience really responded positively to the animation, and I don't feel like there was actually a limit to how much animation we should have included. That if I had more time to do even more animation, that it actually would not have hurt the project in any way. So that's really satisfying to me as an artist and a director who feels like animation is a really great tool to do all sorts of things in the project, or in projects, in films and in TV shows. And I think you see now that, I'll just stop my screen share now. I think you see now that even more and more directors are using animation as a tool to tell their stories, and you know, a lot of it, I'm very particular about how animation is used, so I don't always love it, but I think that there are directors who are using animation in more interesting ways, and I've gotten more opportunities myself to use animation in more projects as well. So,
Yes, Mickey. Thank you so much. I know it's not done yet, but there is a question, and it is
right.
related to your just previous presentation.
Yeah.
It is from James Russ. And before I read this question, I would like also to inform everyone here, all the attendees, that at the end of this webinar, we will pick three best questions. So don't hesitate to drop your questions on Q&A feature on your Zoom. Okay, Mickey, this is the question. As visuals have such an impact, like that oh moment with the Bo Jackson animation, and as there are more technology app options for the general public to make animations. As an educator, James Russ would like to know, how would you take this system down to a daily or even hourly way that could be done for storytelling that teachers can use with the students or learners?
Well, how would I give you a daily and an
It's like,
hourly
yeah, it's
system?
probably it's like in a short way.
Yeah. Well, like I said, if you are capable of doing an edit and you have some shot footage that you're thinking about doing this kind of hybrid animation uh, kind of film, like I said, in the edit, just create some areas where some slugs where you're putting in very basic thumbnail sketches, and animation can be done in any way. I do hand drawn animation, but you could use anything you have nearby to do stop motion animation as well. Um, you could do paper cutouts,
Mhm.
anything that you feel comfortable with. I hope that my work shows that you don't need to do 30 frames a second, something really elaborate and expensive with a large team. Um, you could do something very small scale and still have it play a really important and interesting visual role in your project. So I certainly feel like students could use this system. Breaking it down hourly is a little bit hard to do right now, but I hope that they find this way of working to be accessible.
To be honest, Mickey, from your type of film, which you have already shared to us, like hybrid things,
Hmm.
for me it eases us as the audience to understand more the content of the documentary itself, because I don't know, it's like not many people love documentary films. They love like the story ones, right? Sometimes, but the documentary with the animation section, it's like ease us to understand what happened. Just like you mentioned uh, the the scene with the bow injuries, and also with the tanning. I really love the tanning, the tanning part of Jax, for
Yeah.
example. It's like, like as the audience, I understand more what happened. Like the story, like uh, goes smoother. I mean, the flow of the events in the documentary itself, and also in a perfect 18,
Yeah.
I could feel like the moment when the IT manager got the perfect one, right? The last hole that, and there's like
Yeah.
everyone celebrated it. So sometimes when we watch the, let's say, previous or let's say common documentary without animation, it's like we are trying to guess. We are trying to guess what happened, like the story, what happened with the story itself. But when you add the animation, it's like wow, it's like adding more. I don't know. It's like adding more entertainment part of the documentary itself. It's so entertaining, Mickey.
Well, here's something that I found out that I figured out over making some films that surprised me, which is that I think most directors think about animation where it's well we'll use animated sequences to show parts of the story that we don't have in video.
Mm-hmm.
What I found actually is that sometimes animation works better than
Mm.
the video that you have. Because I think to what you're saying, and I love hearing, what you're saying because I do feel like, I'm trying to direct those sequences so that the viewers are focusing on a specific element, and it's presented in this kind of elevated way that's very clear to understand. And sometimes, I think we had photos of Jack tanning on the side of the court, but I don't know, I just felt intuitively that that sequence would play so well in animation. Also, Jack himself is such a cartoon character of a
Yes.
person
Yes.
that it just worked so well. But sometimes animation works better than having the footage, which might seem surprising, but yeah, to your point, it can serve to really focus someone's attention,
Mm-hmm.
or or elevate. The film that you're talking about is a story about a miniature golf,
Mm-hmm.
story that happened on a miniature golf course. The course itself, it looks like where kids play and everything, but when
Yeah.
I drew it, I tried to draw it in this way that feels like, oh, here's this huge, hugely important place, and it's very dramatic, and it's staged in a certain way. So that's something that the art and design side of animation can do.
Yes. And actually, we have another two more questions. But before that, I would like to have another information for all the for all attendees that actually losers is series. There are some stories, and one of them is the story of Jack Ryan or the Black Jack. And we watched the Black Jack from the AFS 2021. Okay, yeah, the next question is from Dedi Roshadi from Jombang. Many people do the work like filmmaker has the circumstances behind the production of their works and as their yeah. Then what is the first thing about the step of creation of filmmaker? Though to make the great work, maybe like the object or the message that able to inspire the audience. So just like for me to understand this question is like the most important point, Mickey. Is like for example, uh, how could we come up with the Jack Ryan?
Yeah, I think I, yeah, I think I understand whether what's the most important thing to consider when you're crafting these sequences. Is it
Mm-hmm.
the animation itself, or the message behind it? Everything is in service of the story,
Mm-hmm.
for sure. I feel like the I, what's exciting to me as an artist and an animator is the role that animation can play to help tell the story. It's not just that I want to draw things that I think are exciting and cool, even though I think that that's fun and satisfying for me as an artist as well. But Losers was a series that it was about something um, that moved me. I feel a little bit outside of main or kind of American sports culture that's so focused champions and winning at all cost. And I feel like American society is very ruthless uh, towards people like Jack or other people that we focused on in our series, who did not make the professional ranks, who did not make millions of dollars. They're kind of cast aside. Jack in particular, because he's so famous, at least in the street ball basketball world. Every single day somebody comes up to him and asks him, "Hey, man, it stinks. You didn't make the pros. You could have made millions of dollars. How does that make you feel?" Um, and I think that that's really unfair to people like him, because many of us don't live these lives of championship wins and millions of dollars. We fall in between being you know, a wild success or a total abject failure. Uh, all of our lives are made up of wins and losses. And I felt what the series could do, and what I was trying to do as a director and as an artist in the project, was tell a dignifying story of someone who um, our culture doesn't really celebrate. Someone who found a unique path for himself. And I think he's just a very, very, he's a real individual in a way that I think is really fun too. He's kind of a clown. At times he can be kind of a sad clown almost. And I felt that the art could help to serve, showing what a unique individual he was, and also what a beautiful person he is in having found the path that he did. So, which is a long way of answering the question that I feel like the message, the artistic intent, is always the number one focus, and that's really my job as a director to make sure that my focus is clear, and that I'm driving the bus, and that everyone that's working on the project is in the bus, and we're all going in the same direction.
Okay, I think it answers the question. And Mickey, I have a question also from my colleague Caroline. It's an interesting one. Um, do you think COVID is going to accelerate the use of animation in documentary and fiction? For example, in the final of Blacklist season, yeah, they use animation because they cannot do the shooting in the beginning of the pandemic. How do you think about this, Mickey?
Well, it's funny. My pandemic experience was really filled with a lot of people calling me and asking me to do animation for them for that exact reason. I do think that the conversations that I've had, at least from my perspective, I've gotten calls from directors and producers who feel that what I did in Losers makes animation more accessible or more possible for their productions. And I mean, you could just see it if you're on Netflix or HBO. Many more documentary projects seem to be including animation now, whether that's a product of the pandemic or not. Um, I think I said earlier, I'm not always a huge fan of how it's used, but when it's done well, I think it gives the director a really potent tool to use, and it allows them to tell stories that maybe, if you're trying to tell it conventionally, just with archive and interviews, that it's kind of, you have an incomplete package. Animation can help make it possible to make. So I'm looking forward to seeing what more is done. Obviously, I'm continuing to work in animation myself too, but yeah, I do think that this is a moment where more directors are using it as a tool.
I do agree. By the way, Mickey, because we have already talked about the pandemic and
Yeah.
also story behind losers, I think I would like to share the video from you, a video from the Italian students who also had their quarantine during the pandemic, and they were really, really inspired by your story, specifically the Black Jack or Jack Ryan. Mbak Esti, could we show it? Yes. Thank you.
Hi, Jack. Here are some messages from my students to you.
Hi, thanks for having answered us. See you in Italy.
Hi, bro. I admire you for your determination and for what you do for children.
Hi, Jack Ryan. You taught me that you can be successful even by defeats. Never give up.
Hi, Jackie. Your story is very particular. It demonstrates that we must never give up. You are a great Jackie.
Bro, you are so crazy and I love it.
Hi, Black Jack. I saw your story and I love it so much. My life. I try to become like you, of course.
Hi, Jack. I was a blackjack and wow, your character is fantastic and you're really amazing.
Hi, Jackie. I'm too excited for your answer. You are great people and example very well. We wait for your reply. You really inspired me.
Hello, Jack Ryan. Never give up.
Hi, Jack. I want to tell you something said by Muhammad Ali, who isn't brave enough to take risk. We do not win in the life.
Hi, Jack. I think you are a winner, even if someone might think you are a loser. Bye.
Hello, Jack. After watching the loser episode, I want to tell you that you are a great champion in everything you have done in your life and continue your goals. You made basketball not your job, but your life. Best wishes.
Thanks for having us with us. We are waiting for you, Italy. Bye.
Thank you. I have similar response uh, from sorry to the students, because when I watched the movie at the beginning, I felt like, oh, what was going on with Jack? It's like he was failure many times. It's like the flow was going down, but then it's raising up. I really like his statement with the kids when he said that if you are surrounded by the negative people, you will have negative influence, and if you are surrounded by the positive people, you will have positive influence in your life. It's a very strong statement, Mickey.
Well, I think that getting that video from the Italian students really, we were just talking about my artistic intent for the project, and why try to use my skills as a director and an artist to elevate a story like Jack's. That's getting a video like that is such a great reward. Actually, this conversation is a great reward for that also, because I think that especially in the last year during the pandemic, many of us have felt like our futures are a little bit unclear, that what's going on in the world, maybe what some of us are doing with our work, is not really, I don't know, feeling right, and it's unclear, what kind of success looks like for us. Jack is someone who, and he would freely admit that he was his own worst enemy a lot of times. He created a lot of the problems for himself that he had to overcome. But even still, he did find a path, over a period of years to finding work and a life for himself that's actually really, really gratifying for him. And I think that's inspiring to any of us who maybe are trying to find our true paths in this world in ways that might be not kind of your classic definition of...
Recording in progress.
So I just want to talk a little bit about the kind of legacy of this project for Jack, aside from just the students, really enjoying the project. Jack had his life story turned into a scripted feature film. Another director did a feature film on him. Jack was invited to come back to the schools where he was kicked out of, the colleges. He was invited to come back and perform. They're really embracing him now after they had, not a good relationship. And, a funny thing that happened last summer was that our series was nominated for some like big fancy American TV awards called Emmy Awards. And I was really excited because, well, there's an irony to a series called Losers potentially winning, a big award, and I just thought that was really funny. And all the subjects, like Jack, got very excited about, the possibility of that happening too. But the night of the awards, we didn't end up winning, so all of us were a little bit sad. And then I got a message from Jack, and he said, in totally the same spirit of the show, he said, "You know what? We don't need a trophy to validate what we did. We already won by making what we made together and sharing it with people." And I should say Netflix is in 190 countries, so millions of people all around the world got to see this story. Jack just felt like we already won. So he was totally right.
Totally agree, Mickey. But by the way, let's continue to the next questions. We have question from Christy Lawrence here. Um, Hello, thank you very much for sharing your insight. I imagine that you had to cut a lot of footage to produce Losers in 30 minutes episodes. Very great question here. How did you decide which parts to include, especially considering the immense responsibility that the documentary maker has in telling the subject's life stories?
Yeah, well, that's one of the great. Just to talk about that responsibility part, that's one of the unique pleasures, I think, of making a documentary about a subject is that there is a huge amount of pressure and responsibility to deliver these stories in ways that are dignified, that are full of feeling, and that feel true to the experience of the subjects. It's hard exactly to say, what guided my choices. As a director, you're making thousands of choices about what story elements to include, what to cut. Our episodes, I think our longest episode was only 37 minutes. They went from between 24 minutes to 37 minutes. So, you're having to get a lot of information into a kind of tight package sometimes. But, our whole team was aligned in first of all, telling these stories that were dignified, that felt, for Jack, being able to tell the story of his unique relationship with his daughter and how that gives him a feeling of satisfaction that is so much different than what, a professional basketball career would have given to him. Being able to spend time with him and the students that he performs in front of these days, those are really, really important moments that I feel speaks so much more to who he is as an individual than him doing kind of crazy moves on the basketball court. So all of this stuff is really intuitive as a director, wanting to focus on what you think is important and underreported about someone like Jack, and that really guides the decision-making process when we're looking at the story. But also you're trying to tell an entertaining story, I like to include those sequences that are funny, because that's a part of Jack that's really important and unique too, and it's fun for an audience, so I should say not every episode has, moments that are as funny as some of the moments in Jack's episode, but those were fun things to craft and share with an audience too.
So it's like responsibility points and entertainment points. It could be
That's
funny
right.
or yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we will go to the next part of the discussion that I would like to ask this one to you, Mickey. It's like what kind of social critics, Mickey, that you would like actually elevate through losers?
Yeah, well, this is an important question because, like I said, I feel a little bit outside of mainstream American sports culture. I think this is something that's known all around the world that Americans and American society is very, very focused on winning. You know, winning at all cost, and becoming rich and famous, no matter what you have to do to get there. Um, I never connected with that, and I feel like there are a lot of people like me who value other things besides those things, or we feel that maybe in many parts of American society, this singular focus on fame and fortune and winning has been really destructive. So, like I said before, with regards to Jack, this goes for all the subjects that we focused on in the series. I feel like there was something really underreported that's still very valuable about all of these stories that haven't really been elevated in the same way we try to do in our series. I think culturally, actually, the our sports culture just missed these stories. They whiffed on them, and it was really, really unfortunate that, well, once you're labeled, this is why we called the series Losers, too. Losers. Because once you're seen as, a quote-unquote loser in the public eye, you're pushed off the stage. No one thinks that you have any value anymore. And I think that, you look at a story like Jack's, you see how they reinvented themselves and actually found a way to contribute to society and feel good about themselves in ways that are different than what maybe their earlier definitions of success were, and how inspiring that is for all of us, even if we're not professional athletes. That's a experience that all of us kind of go through at different points. All of our lives, have highs and lows. We're not all on these, undefeated winning streaks of fortune and fame. There are moments where we have to take stock of our lives, I think the pandemic is a perfect example of this, to take a look in the mirror and say, what's really important to us? Not what the world is telling us what's important, but what's important and satisfying for us as individuals, spiritually, psychologically. How do we feel like we're interacting with people around us? And so I feel like these were the things that were really, really important for me to convey in the series. And, it's just a great, like I said before, a great artistic satisfaction to be having these conversations and to feel like people like Jack or other subjects now have a greater platform themselves to do the work that they do and to be appreciated for who they are. Because I feel like American society and society in general around the world could stand to do better in showcasing and honoring people like Jack.
I do agree, Mickey. It's like many major films, as you say, it's like from rags to riches or from nothing to it's like top or success story. But here, what I really enjoy is how the inspiration is portrayed as a very important point than anything, because in a sports itself, the winning streak is almost, I don't know, impossible. You can do it in one season, but in a 2 seasons, oh, it's so difficult. So having defeat in a journey of your team is very important also to rebuild your mentality to get up, to be better. Because I just learned from, yeah, from the soccer teams who just undefeated in a 1 year, and then they had a more burden, more burden, because they never feel the defeat itself. So they said that defeat is important to us to rebuild our confidence. So this is the thing that, yeah, it's like losers inspire us, inspire many people. And I guess
I
we
just
have
want to
another question here.
add
Yeah,
one thing
say
quickly
please.
to that. Just adding to that quickly. It's failure is a part of life. It's an important part of life, and we shouldn't be ashamed to say that, because oftentimes, failures are not getting exactly what we want when we want it. That gives us a moment to think about things differently, and oftentimes those moments, as you see in our series, not just in Jack's episode, those moments actually, uh, we see a new path for ourselves that we might not have seen otherwise. And oftentimes those paths are the ones that we should really be on. So, we should actually be grateful for some of those moments. Obviously, failure is painful, and there are consequences to that. But if you try to see those moments as opportunities, um, oftentimes you'll be rewarded. You'll find something new that you didn't see before, and maybe take some real positives away from that experience.
Yes, Mickey. Yeah, I would like to continue to another question here. From Alonso Guzman Barone. Hi, Mickey. Hope all is well. I was wondering what kind of projects are you working on nowadays? Is there any animated series on the horizon? If you want to share.
Yeah, well, I'm working on some new documentary projects. I'm actually working on two documentary features right now. I don't want to give too much information, but both of them have animated components to them. They're both. I'm continuing to do this hybrid, like I did with Losers, but not a series per se.
Okay, and do we have another questions here? Uh, yes, again from Christy Lawrence here. Hello again. Would you consider making a rendition of Losers that focuses on people outside of the sports world, where
Yeah.
perhaps the line between winners and losers is less pronounced?
Well, for sure. I feel like these kind of underdog stories, these stories where, you know, subjects kind of are thinking about success in different ways. These stories are not limited to the sports world. Obviously, there are many stories around the world of politicians who've had setbacks or have lost elections, but that kind of created a different path for them. I feel like there are many business stories that could be told with this kind of idea. Um, Actually, when I did Loser, so speaking about kind of my own losses, Netflix decided not to renew the show for future seasons. That was something that we had talked about, but after we did the first season, we decided to work on different things together rather than continuing to pursue Losers. But my dream was that Losers was going to turn into something outside of the sports world in second and third seasons, that they would be either political stories or business stories or so forth. But I still feel like I am drawn to stories that are like this. You could say, with that, like I said, I'm not giving kind of details yet about what I'm working on right now, but they're very Losers-esque type stories, where there are kind of surprising turns and ups and downs in the lives of our subjects. And both of the films are not in the sports world, so I think I'm thinking along the same lines of this question, because like I said, all of us can connect to these stories, even if we're not professional athletes, because this kind of reimagining and redefining success for ourselves I mean, that's a universal experience, whether we're athletes or not.
By the way, I have another question, Mickey.
Yeah.
What kind of sports do you like? Because you portray many sports in losers.
So I'm a big, well, I used to be an athlete before I went to art school. Back when I was a teenager, I was an athlete. There was a small moment where I thought maybe I could pursue a tennis career. So tennis has always been a big sport for me. And actually, I mean, I watch all sports. I like tennis and football and baseball. But I should say when I was a teenager, when I was 17 years old, it was probably the best moment of being an athlete that I was. I had everything that I would ever have. I was playing in the state tournament in Michigan, and I was playing against a young guy, a freshman who was 14 years old, and he was destroying me. And I went to my coach and I said, you know, give me a tip of something that I can do here on the court. I'm, losing so bad. And the coach, he would always have good advice for me. But on that day, he said, Mick, like you would not beat this guy on your best day. He's so much better than you. And so he just said, well, just enjoy what's left of this match because, it's not going to be long. And actually, that was the weekend that, I was deciding between being a tennis player and moving to New York to go to art school. And that weekend, I decided to go to art school instead of pursuing my athletic dreams. So in a way, I would always joke when I was making Losers that was my own personal Losers story. That created a different avenue for myself.
Now it explains everything. Okay, Mickey, one last question for today's webinar, today's discussion with you, which is I'm so excited having this discussion with you. Another question from James Russ here. Who are some storytellers or animators, illustrators, or directors who you admire and are inspired by? Who are you watching and learning from these days?
Well, I'm inspired mostly by directors who take unconventional approaches to storytelling. I feel like I'm an experimentalist myself. So directors whose work I'm drawn to aren't necessarily people who are doing things that are visually in the animation universe so much as they're just telling different types of stories and revealing kind of underappreciated values. I love Chris Smith. American Movie is one of my favorite films of all time. I love an American director named John Hawk, whose work is really incredible. Christina Constantini is a favorite of mine. I could go on. I also love, some classic directors like Steve James and Errol Morris in the documentary world. From a visual perspective, I'm always looking for, things that are animation styles that are efficient and feel accessible to, a small team or an artist like myself. But a lot of what I look at are kind of older references. I look at, Disney documentaries that used animation in the 1950s. I look at video game animation from, video game systems in the 80s and 90s where the graphics are very, very simple. Let's see, I look at old Soviet animation. I really, I draw from a lot of different sources. But, I think that as someone who tries to experiment, rather than, looking at, I just love directors who have this experimental approach, and I try in my own way to combine different references from different times in history, visually or thematically, as kind of inspiration for my experiments.
Thank you so much, Mickey, and thank you so much also for the questions, James Russ. It's gonna be great things to be shared to all of us here. So, we are going to be at the end of today's webinar, today's discussion. Mbak Esti, please help me to distribute the polling, and we are going to announce the best questions too. Okay, so all attendees, please help us complete the short polling. Hopefully, this feedback will give us more insights in handling or in conducting future events, future events. Okay. Yes. Let me check with the team, Mickey, the best questions. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So the best three questions for today's discussion go to, with the drum roll, um, James Ross. Yes. And the second one is Christy. I'm looking for the full name here. Okay, and the last one is Daddy Roshadi. Okay, once again, the first one is James Ross. The second one is Christy Lawrence. And the third one is Daddy Roshadi. Okay, I guess the the information of the best questions will be displayed soon by the host. Yep. Okay, and the polling is done. Thank you so much for the polling. The host can close the polling. Okay. Yep. And this is the best questions once again. James Russ, Christy Lawrence, and Dedi Roshadi. Please send your details to passurabaya@state.gov or send via chat on Zoom. Okay. To be honest, I'm so glad that we have very great questions and also great talks with you, Mickey.
Oh, my pleasure. This was a real privilege. Thank you all. You know, for everyone in attendance, you should know that there is quite a production behind the scenes, from the interpreters to the sign language interpreters, and we're all grateful to all of you for your excellent work.
Okay. Yes, to close today's discussion, I would like to